Welcome to Wine Soundtrack International. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world. In 30 answers, discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Alison Levine, and today I'm with Nigel Westblade. He's the winemaker at Peter Lehmann Wines. That's in the Barossa Valley in Australia. Nigel, welcome and tell us about Peter Lehmann.
Thanks for having me, Alison. Yeah, Peter Lehmann Wine, as you said, is located in the Barossa Valley in Australia, where I guess the interesting thing about Peter Lehmann Wine is where we come from and why we exist. So I'll just go into that a little bit for you.
Yeah, please do.
Sure. So in 1977, Peter Lehmann was a winemaker, winery manager for a large multinational wine company. And during that time, there was a large oversupply of grapes in not just the Barossa, but in Australia in general. During that year, the management told Peter, you're going to have to go out and tell all your growers, we're not going to buy any grapes this year. We've got more than enough wine already in the tanks to keep us going, and we'll talk again next year. Now, Peter's obviously at that stage, he's a fifth generation Barossa, living in the Barossa for 5 generations. And so he'd grown up with these people, and he sort of thought about it for a couple of days, and he just decided there is absolutely no way I can go out and tell these growers that I'm not taking their fruit this year, because no one else was going to take it. For most of these growers, that was their only source of income for the year, so it would have been absolutely devastating for these guys. So he thought about it long and hard, and in the end he managed to beg, borrow and steal, and he did manage to steal a little bit of winery equipment and got enough to get a small winery together. So and at that stage he basically had to go to his growers and said, look guys, I've spent all my money on getting this together. I can't afford to pay for the grapes this year, but what we'll do is, if you give me the grapes, I'll make wine out of it, and I'll sell the wine, and I'll pay you first, and then if there's any money left over, then I'll pay myself. And that's exactly what happened, and still to this day, we still have, that's the core of our grower base, is the original growers.
Wow, that's a wonderful story. I know that Peter Lehmann unfortunately passed away a few years ago. He lived a long, full life. How long have you been the winemaker there?
So I've been a chief winemaker now for 3 years, so it's been a very steep learning curve, but I've had a great time. I've got a great team of winemakers with me, so I have 3 winemakers, Tim, Brett and Brooke, and so they're a very stable team and they're very capable winemakers as well, so the transition was no problem at all.
Wow, so now you're following on the same tradition, working with a number of growers. Do you own any estates as well?
Yeah, so since we're currently owned by the Cellar family, still a family-owned business, and they have expanded their footprint in the Barossa Valley. So probably the site itself is probably around 200 acres with the winery and adjacent vineyard. And then there's probably throughout the Barossa, there's probably 4 sites totaling up around 1,000 acres of vines as well for the company. Wow.
And how many growers are you working with?
So currently we're working with probably about 115 to 120 growers. Yeah.
Wow. Lots of small little growers out there.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it's interesting because we take parcels of fruit from 1 or 2 tonne from our small guys all the way up to the bigger guys. Probably the largest grower we have is probably delivering in about 160 tonne. Of fruit. So it's a challenge to manage, but the growers all got fantastic personalities, and they've been doing it a long time, and they have a good understanding of what we want and what they can do. So it's still a really good relationship.
Yeah. What's your total case production?
So currently at the moment, the winery itself is making around that 2 million cases a year.
Okay, 2 million cases, and available around the world?
Correct. So we are probably about half our sales are domestically, and then obviously in the major markets, so Europe, both in the UK and mainland Europe, as well as the US, Canada, and several other markets as well.
So tell me about your first memory relevant to wine.
It's probably the reason why I became a winemaker. So I guess I started off originally, I did a straight pure science degree at Melbourne University, so there was no exposure to wine there. And I was getting to the end of that 3-year course and ended up going to a 21st birthday party, and I was speaking to a guy I'd never met before who just happened to be a winemaker, and I was sort of explaining my situation where I'm coming to the end of my degree. I grew up, I'm from a farming family. I really love farming, but I don't really want to be a farmer so much, but I still, I love science, but I still like to be involved in the agriculture sector somehow. Mm-hmm. And he sort of just suggested offhand that you might, like being a winemaker. And he suggested I do a vintage. So that's exactly what I did. I did my first vintage, and I was hooked after that.
Wow. And so you did your first vintage where? In Australia?
Yeah, in Australia, in Delatite, in a small little winery, probably a 200-ton winery in the Highlands in Victoria.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so do you remember one of the first wines you drank, one of the first most memorable wines you drank, and what that occasion was?
I guess probably the first one that I really remember was Delatite Riesling, and because that was the first wine that, there was only one cellar hand in the winery, so I did all the work on that wine. So when you tasted it at the end, you were so proud of what you had achieved. I guess I couldn't believe it tasted as good as it did since I did all the grunt work on it, I guess. So yeah, no, that still stays with me, and I still have a couple of bottles in the cellar from that vintage as well.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, well, Riesling ages well, so I bet it's pretty damn good.
Yeah, no, definitely. We break them out every now and on special occasions. So.
Traveling the world abroad, who do you think drinks the best in terms of quality?
That's a good question. I think probably from the markets I've been at, who have the best access to quality wine, probably the Canadians. And I guess because they're not such a strong, I know they do make a reasonable amount of wine, but the markets are quite open there. So you go into wine shops and restaurants, they just have amazing wine lists, and they're quite open, especially say in places like BC, and trying new wine from different regions. So, and their stalls reflect that. So they have an amazing range of wines to taste. You could buy wine out of some of those shops for years and just always find something new. So.
Wow. So, you've worked other places, right? I know that we were talking and you told me that you'd spent a little time working in the US. Tell us where else you've worked.
Okay, so probably one of the more interesting places I worked is I spent 4 years in China. So working for a Chinese company, Shandong Weilong Grape Company. So they were kind of interesting. They had wineries on the coast, right in the middle of the country, so right on the edge of the Gobi Desert, and then in the far west in Xinjiang, where we could actually go on top of the tank farms and you could look into the Kazakhstan. You could see the border crossing point. So basically from coast to coast in China, and that was just an amazing experience. So
yeah, China isn't really a place. I know that, we're starting to hear a little bit more about it, but you were there towards the beginning of the Chinese wine industry.
Yeah, so we did a lot of startups. So in the time there, we built several wineries. One of them was a 120,000-ton winery, which is, that's large by world standards. And amazingly, they managed to throw that from basically a bare paddock to an operational winery in less than 6 months. It's quite amazing. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you've made wine in China. You've had some Chinese wine. If we were to come to your home and go into your cellar, I'm not asking how large it is, but what would we find in your cellar? Would we find some Chinese wine?
No. Look, the Chinese are doing a really good job and they're learning really fast. But at this stage, no, I don't have any Chinese wine that I'm putting down. Probably what you're finding with me, as I said, Riesling was the first sort of wine. Delatite was known for their Riesling. So since the beginning, I've always had a bit of a passion for Riesling. So still I have quite a few aged Rieslings. And I guess I'm a little bit back to front where I really like my whites aged and I prefer to drink my reds probably a little bit younger than most people. So that 3 to 5 years, and probably I like to see some of those really nice Semillons and Rieslings, 10 years plus. I think they're really amazing wines.
And mostly Australian wines that we'd find in your cellar?
Yeah, mostly Australian wines, of course. So I'm on a winemaker's salary, so we can't afford too much.
So do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
No, definitely not. I think I haven't found it yet anyway. So Shiraz for me in the Barossa is probably about as close as match where the variety and the place and the location, and is about as perfect as you can get for me. But there's always challenges, and I guess what may be perfect one year will be a real nightmare for you the next year. So I guess there's always, making wine is always in a state of flux. You've always got a lot of balls in the air, and unfortunately it's never just perfect, but that's what makes it so fun, So you're always trying, there's always different challenges, and there's always something new to learn. So yeah.
Well, and we're always trying to learn, so obviously we look at different sources for that information. What is your opinion on wine critics and scores?
Yeah, look, I think a lot about wine critics and scores and the show system in general. And, I have some reservations about the show system, but then, you think about it, I don't have a better system to come up with, so I think it's the best one we have. And I am involved to do a bit of wine show judging, and I can honestly say everyone doing it is really trying their best to get the best result. It's not an exact science, and we do get it wrong sometimes. And I think that's why sometimes I encourage people to find wine writers or wine critics, taste some of their wines and see if what you're tasting aligns with that critic, and then follow the critic. So sometimes you're better off following a wine writer or a wine critic that you seem to have a similar taste to, rather than just going off a plain score or gold medals or trophies or something along that line. So find someone that you really like the wine, you like the wine that they like, and you can't go wrong.
So let me ask you, as a wine consumer, red, white, or rosé?
Look, I'm in the Barossa. I have to say red, and I have to say Shiraz. I just love it. It's beautiful tannin structure, beautiful fruit weight. You can't go wrong. And special occasions or a Tuesday night, just having a bit of pasta after a long day. It's perfect for every occasion.
So if I were to say still or sparkling?
We do make sparkling Shiraz, so that's if you really need sparkling, we have a sparkling Shiraz we can give you. So and that's probably a idiosyncratic style, probably particular to Australia, and particularly to the Barossa. Basically, we probably sell 90% of that during the Christmas period. It's really a festive wine, our sparkling Shiraz. So very uncommon, but if you do see it out in the bottle shops, definitely give it a go, because it is quite a unique style, and it's something interesting to taste.
Definitely unique. Yeah. So when it comes to pairing, you just talked about coming home on a Tuesday and having, some pasta and some Shiraz. How do you approach food and wine pairing? Do you think there are rules to follow? Do you believe in the kind of red meat, red wine, fish, and white wine? Or how do you approach it when you're either at home or going out? Yeah,
I guess very, very loosely follow the white meat, white wine, red meat, red wine, but quite happy to break that rule as well. So generally, it just depends. I usually pick the wine for the mood I'm in, and then also you pick the food for the mood you're in. So if you feel like having a Shiraz and scallops, and that's okay as well. So look, I think it's more about enjoying the food, enjoying the wine, and enjoying the company you're with. Don't get too hung up on the rules that you must have white wine with scallops and things like that. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be enjoyable. So if you've only got a bottle of Shiraz in the cupboard, that's okay. You can have that with a white pasta. That's fine. Yeah.
So for someone who hasn't had the opportunity to taste your wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
I think it's interesting to see, because we do have in our range, we have some wines that are traditionally made, and we also have some contemporary made in more contemporary manner. So it's tasting our wines. If you go through the range, it's kind of interesting to see what different styles that Shiraz can do, and the variances in the Shiraz. And we have some wines, single vineyard wines, so you can see what individual sub-regions in the Barossa do as well. So it's a really good. We are a very Shiraz-centric winery, and we're very proud of the Shiraz we make. But we'd like to think we do show good examples of what the variety can do.
So speaking of good examples, if space aliens were to land on your property, which of the wines would you want to present to them?
I'd probably I'd have to give them Barossa, the Barossa Shiraz. So that sort of sits right in the middle of our portfolio. But that's the winemakers. That's our newest release, and the winemakers worked really hard on that one. And I guess the work we did on that was really trying to get that really soft, round mouthfeel. So I guess one of the difference there, it's a good introduction to wine. It's still got a little bit of tannin structure there, but it's really nice, soft and round. And I think it'd just be a good introduction to wines for the aliens to get their head around. So we'd have a good time, I think, after a couple of bottles. Yeah.
You were speaking a little bit earlier about how when we were talking about a perfect variety, how, generally you think that Shiraz is well suited to Australia and where you're growing it. But of course, there's variation from year to year. So thinking about vintage variation, in the Barossa Valley, do you see that there's more things that repeat themselves year after year, or do you see really big differences from vintage to vintage?
I guess in the 3 years I've been there, it has quite big difference variation, and that comes down to rainfall. But I guess the advantage for us is, as I said, we have those 100 growers, and they're in there's 9 sub-regions within Barossa Valley, and we have growers within those 9 sub-regions. So you generally find, it doesn't matter what vintage conditions you get, you'll get 1 or 2 or 3 sub-regions really shine and out, and you can still make some really good, nice wine out of them. So, yeah.
So you have a team. Do you guys have any good luck rituals for when you're starting harvest?
No, we usually we start off with a bottle of scotch for good luck. Yeah. So that's it.
That's a tradition.
And then when the last grapes go, we're keen, we're all excited. It's we can't wait for the vintage. And then usually by the time the last truckload comes around, which is probably 8 weeks later, we pull out the bottle of scotch again because we're quite happy to see the last truck go through. And our families are all missing us and our children miss us. So it's nice to go home and, just spend a bit of time with the family. But, there's always a start with the scotch and finish with a scotch. So, definitely. We do have we're not supposed to have beer at work, but we do also have we have a sneaky little fridge that's in a hidden cupboard there. So I'll probably get in trouble for telling this story, but we've got a little stash of beer that, on a Thursday or a Friday, it's a tough job. It's a long week. So we're not immune from cracking out and having a cold beer as well. So.
Well, they do say that it takes a lot of beer to make good wine.
Never a truer word's been said. So, that's definitely the case. Yeah.
Do you look for any signs or omens to help you predict what a harvest is going to give you?
For us, I guess we're kind of lucky where the Barossa generally very dry during the end of harvest, but I guess we're looking really at the spring, making sure we're going into spring with full soil profiles of moisture. And that really sets us up for a good vintage. So we know going, say, 2020, it's a little bit wetter than 2019. 19 was a very dry year for us. So, we struggle a lot with grapes getting overripe, but so you already know that's going to happen. So you pre-prepare, and you're getting the winemakers. We're getting out there earlier than what we normally would to make sure we get the jump, and we're still bringing that fruit in exactly the best time.
So weather obviously is a big dictator as to what you're going to have.
That's a bit of a boring one, but it does the job. It works well for us so far. So
Do you ever walk through the cellars and have a little chat with your wine as it's in barrel, or do you talk to the grapes when they're on the vines, telling what you expect of them when they're going to be in barrel?
I have been known to walk through the cellar and talk to myself and talk to the tanks. So, and sometimes I'm venting a little bit of frustration at the wines when they're not doing exactly what I want them to do. And other times it's a lot more positive. But I have been known definitely to walk around the cellar talking to myself. So,
talking to the wine, not to yourself.
And the wine, definitely.
So you said that you were first introduced to wine, kind of at a 21st birthday, and it was it wasn't something that you had really ever thought of. So when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I never really knew. I guess I grew up on a farm. I love farming and I love the lifestyle. So I guess it was always, and we still run a family property. So if ever the winemaking gig didn't work out, I'd probably, hopefully I'd be welcomed back on the family farm. So,
And when you're not working, how do you spend your free time?
I've got 3 young kids, so spare time's not something really I have a lot of, but I'm a very forgiving partner, so I like to go out and go fishing every now and again by myself on a kayak. And when I say fishing, sometimes I'm just paddling out into the middle of the lake and just sitting there and just having a little bit of quiet time. And a beer, So, it's just a nice, relaxing part, thing to do. So.
Any other sports you like to do?
I used to play Australian football in my younger years, but that's probably aged me about 15 years, I think. So I retired young, and I'm still feeling the effects of playing a contact sport all through my childhood,
And do you have a team that you're a fan of?
Of course, the Hawthorn Hawks. So we've had a pretty good run of late, but unfortunately not this year wasn't the year for us. So,
well, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, hopefully next year they'll have a better year. And if and when they were to win the next championship, which of your wines would you want to present to them?
We have a new wine which is just about to be released. So Barossa Shiraz. So that's a new project for the wine. So that's a really special wine for us. That's the best single vineyard parcel of the year, and that's generally a really special wine. And we put it down, and we store that wine in new foudres, so they're 2,500 litre barrels. We'll store it for 36 months before we package it. So that's just a really beautiful wine, and we're really excited about it.
So we need the Hawthorn Hawks to win.
We do. Definitely. We only made 1,000 bottles, so I might get in trouble if I give out 25 bottles. But we'll definitely, if they win, I'll definitely send them 25 bottles, I think.
You have 3 small kids, so obviously you said you don't have a lot of free time. I'm not sure you get a lot of romantic time either. But if you were to have a romantic evening, what wines would you pull out for a romantic evening?
That's a good question. Probably would pull out we've got some really nice old Stonewell Shiraz sitting in the cellar, so some 93s, 94s, and these wines, they're getting a little long in age now, but they're still got a beautiful freshness to them and a beautiful tannin line and nice gentle acidity. So definitely when Michelle and I go out for a dinner, which we get to do probably once or twice a year, we definitely just makes it that much more special. So I have to really bring out the big guns and bring out some nice wine.
So if you think back to all the advice you've received in life, what would you say is one of the best pieces of advice you received, and who gave it to you? I
guess probably my current boss, Alan Kennett. He's always said to me when things are going tough and a 22 million case winery is moving into the larger size, just do the simple things well and you can't go wrong. So, and that advice has held me in pretty good stead for most of my career. Yeah, just do the simple things really well, and the big things will take care of themselves. So, yeah.
And if you could offer some advice to our listeners, what advice would you like to share?
Probably just sometimes I think we take wine a bit too seriously. It's supposed to enjoy the wine, enjoy it with good people that you enjoy being around, I think is the main thing. Don't get too hung up on the rules of what wine's supposed to be. If you enjoy the wine, it's a great wine. So it's wine. It's supposed to be fun. Enjoy it. Don't take it too seriously.
Absolutely. So looking back at your career so far, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
I guess probably becoming a chief winemaker and now the site manager for Peter Lehmann wines. So I've been working pretty hard as a winemaker for probably 15 years, and I guess you like to think you're just quietly toiling away, and you like to see that somebody noticed, and the Casella family noticed the hard work and the job I've been doing, and they gave me the responsibility of being chief winemaker at Peter Lehmann Wines, which you end up probably Australia's premier wine region in the Barossa Valley, and just the history. And I really love the story of why Peter Lehmann exists, and that's growing up on a farm. I think that story really resonates with me. So yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Wow. And what comes next? What do you have to aspire to?
Look, we can always do things better, and that's part of the fun about the wine industry, where it never ends. The journey for improving your wine never ends. There's always something you can be doing better. So I guess your really job is just picking which one you think is going to have the biggest impact to the quality of a wine and really pursuing that. So the job never ends, and that's what makes it fun as well. So there's always something to be working on. So
complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like
being at a funeral. This is so sad, you could have I guess coming late to wine in my career, I guess when I was in my 20s, but now every meal we have the wine on the table, and I think it's an important part of having friends and family around and having good conversation. So
Yes. So I want you to imagine a situation. There are paparazzi shooting through a window of a restaurant, and they are capturing a person sitting at a table. This person is sitting at a table with a bottle of your wine on the table. Who would you want that person to be?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Probably, let's go someone like Jason Statham, because he's just an interesting character, and he's someone I can see who would enjoy our wine, and definitely I can see that could actually happen. I think, yeah, definitely.
And then he'll run out in an action scene of some sort.
Of course. And then, all the glass will shatter and a car will come through. And of course,
So, climate change is obviously an issue that everyone's grappling with. How much are you seeing happening in Australia right now? And where do you think we'll be in 500 years' time?
Yeah, I guess, everyone spends a little bit of time thinking about climate change and how that affects them. And I think probably so much from a winery side of point of view, I think we can change our practices, and we can manage the 1 or 2 degree temperature average increase. I guess what really concerns me is what I'm seeing is the increase in variability and the increase in extreme events happening, which a lot more difficult to to manage. So, things like late season hailstorms or frosts or extreme bouts of hot weather right at inopportune times. So that's what keeps me up at night. And in Australia at the moment, we're sort of bud burst has just sort of happened. So we're all anxiously looking at the weather this time of year for frosts and those sort of things that can really break or make our seasons, I guess. Right. But yeah, probably the increase in extreme weather events is what really concerns me. Like, obviously, the increase in average temperature, you don't like to see that, and we should be trying really hard to avoid that. But strictly speaking, from a winemaking point of view, it'd be the increase in extreme events is what really worries me.
Right.
Yeah.
You think we'll still be drinking wine in 500 years?
I think we'll need to be drinking wine in 500 years. No, look, hopefully we've got the situation well underhand by then. I think we're going in the right direction, and I think, don't underestimate people. People get a bit negative about, the human population, but, we're a pretty resourceful bunch, and I think we'll get there and we'll fix it. I don't have a doubt about that. So Good. Well, if unfortunately, we're not there and you have to go to a deserted island, you're sent to a deserted island, which 3 wines would you take with you? I'd have to take some Delatite Riesling from my first job. Andrew Wigan, the previous chief winemaker, had a passion for Riesling, and so we have one of our Rieslings is named the Wigan in honour of him. So I'd like, and it's interesting, I'm getting to taste a lot of those recently, and some really nice ones from 2002, 2003. So and then to finish off, it would be definitely the Barossa Shiraz. I think just a nice, solid red. To think about what's just happened, how to end up on this island, and how am I going to get off it, So now we play a little game on Wine Soundtrack where I want you to pair the wines that you would take to your deserted island with music, either what you'd want to listen to while you're drinking or what they make you think of. So starting with the Riesling. Let's go Run DMC. Yeah. With Riesling. Yes, Riesling. I like that. Well, it's clean and pure, and it's it's fun. So I like definitely.
Okay. And what about the Barossa Shiraz? Your the one that you would give to the space aliens. Your nice middle of the road. Good tannins but smooth.
Sure.
Shiraz.
So that's something. Let's go something like Nora Jones, where you can just sit back and just in case the aliens get a bit antsy when they turn up, we can all sit down, have a glass of Shiraz, listen to a bit of Nora, and then everyone's going to be relaxed and peaceful, and we have some good conversation after that. So.
And your new Shiraz, your single vineyard, best of the year Shiraz.
Let's go something a little bit different, something like, say, Mark Ronson, some Mark Ronson music, any of his hits, because it's quite individual. I really like it. I think we've gone out, he's done his own thing, and I think we've done that a little bit with Masterson as well. So.
Wow. There you go. That was easy.
Yeah, it was. That was as easy as I thought it was going to be, yeah.
So one more question. You have worked in California, and you've worked in Australia, and you've worked in China. What winemaking region of the world would you love to explore as a visitor, or, whether you want to work there or just travel? What's the top of your bucket list?
So I guess recently we've been dabbling with a little bit of vintage port at Peter. So I think I'd love to go to Portugal just because it's so different in the winemaking. I guess adding when you with the addition of spirit, that's a whole another level of complexity that you have to manage, and I'd be really interested to see how they do it over there. So yeah, definitely Portugal at the moment. Yeah,
Portugal is fantastic. So I think you'd be very happy with that visit.
Yeah, that's right.
So while you plan your trip over to Portugal, which you should do sooner than later, take the kids, Can people come and visit you, and where can they find you and your wines?
Sure. So we have a cellar door that's open 7 days, located on the winery site. So that's in just on the outskirts of Tanunda, which is in the Barossa Valley, which is probably about an hour's drive north of Adelaide. So that's the closest international airport there. So, and Adelaide's if you love wine, Adelaide's a great city because you have some of Australia's great wine regions. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased saying the Barossa's the best, but you also have the Adelaide Hills, McLaren Vale, Clare Valley. So, I think if you really love your food and you love your wine, Adelaide's a great place to visit if you want to come to Australia.
Fantastic. Well, Nigel, thank you so much for joining us today at Wine Soundtrack, and thanks for sharing the story of Peter Lehmann and about you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack International. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.